Everyone, and welcome along to the fourth session. My name is Chris and I'm one of the two Vision to Business directing team. So it's great to have you folks along here. How many of you is this the first time that you've come along? Okay, so we've got a few. How many weren't here then last week? Okay, right. You'll see why I asked that question in a moment. What I'll do for just a couple of minutes is set the context. So for those of you that have been coming along and are ticking your 4 out of 5, this is repetition making permanent. For those of you that haven't been along, hopefully it'll set the scene and give you a little bit of background, a background framework in terms to think about entrepreneurial activity and starting and growing a business. So the first thing that is important to remember is that it is a mix of both opportunity and discipline. So a lot of people think about it's having a great idea and a great big opportunity, but in terms of realising that opportunity and creating a business that is financially sustainable, then you really need to have the discipline and processes that sit in behind that. And we make that point regardless of whether it's a commercial venture or whether it's a social entrepreneurship venture, because in terms of something being socially sustainable, you've still got to have the funding sitting there and coming through. So the process that we have been talking about over the last few weeks has been one that's revolved around the founder, or the person that starts the business, and then in terms of what the opportunity is, what the resources are, and the team. And obviously tonight is a discussion around that. So in terms of thinking about the conversation that we had around opportunity, we need it to be attractive, durable, timely, anchored in a product and service that you're very clear about and one that you can articulate, and something that adds value. And who's got to be uppermost in your mind? It's very simple. It's about the customer. No customer, no business. We then talked about what the business model is, and that is about how you make money. And the clearer you are in terms of how you make money, the better able you're going to be able to get your team on board, to get suppliers on board, to get investors on board, whatever you need. And I know tonight Julie will touch a little bit in terms of what and tell you what her particular business model is. So it could be business to customer, or business to customer, but always thinking about who's going to be using your product. Then last week we picked up on a discussion around resources. So the idea in terms of the resources, the 3 particular balls that sit there in that model, it's very nice to think that you're going to have the resources that will happily match the opportunity that you're thinking about. But of course the reality is that it won't. So what you need to be doing is to think about minimising and controlling as opposed to maximising and owning. So a lot of it is about leverage and thinking cash last. So in terms of then picking up on that conversation, for those of you that weren't here last week, hopefully you noticed somebody that didn't put up their hand so that you can find that person. But please, what were 2 or 3 things that you remember from Andy's presentation last week? Just 2 or 3 things. Please, just 2 minutes to have a conversation with the person sitting next to you, in front of you, or behind you, in terms of just 2 or 3 things from last week's session.
It's kind of a vague area, and it takes quite a bit of thinking to kind of fit in. Yeah, it's interesting. It's very direct. Obviously, you can see the way he's talking. Yeah, Andy Hamilton watched me ice dance.
Oh yeah, I remember. Nothing, that's good. That conversation was obviously about 101 other things. Anything from the session last week? Yeah. Okay, about angel investors. So what were some of the things that he teased out in terms of an angel investor? Yeah. Yeah, I think that is probably a number 1 to take away. There's a reasonable amount of money around at the moment, particularly from angel investors, and there are now quite a few of them. 7 years ago, 8 years ago, we wouldn't be having that conversation. And I know, being involved in the Vision to Business session, I think we first kicked off in 2003, and we would not have been having that same conversation around angel investors. And so what do angel investors bring to the table as far as resources are concerned?
obviously they'll give you a fairly good boost of funding,
Yeah.
provided that obviously they can see that you know what you're doing.
Yeah. So that you've kind of fleshed out that idea, they see an opportunity there, so they bring money in. What else can they bring in?
Guidance.
Yeah, guidance, sorry? Contacts, networks. I was talking with a business this afternoon that, you know, in terms of what they're looking at doing, and yes, they need funding, yes, they need the equity, but in terms of where they want to be over the next 3 to 5 years, the networks, the contacts, the relationships that angel investors can bring in can be absolutely invaluable, and in a sense, sometimes more valuable than the money that they're putting in. What else can you remember from Andy's discussion last week? Where else is money available from? Sorry? The government. Yeah, there's actually, in terms of government grants, often it's dollar for dollar though. I mean, you're spending $1 and then you're getting $1, but there are some very interesting ways of figuring out how you spend $1. So before, when you found as though you were working for nothing, you put in a salary of 60, 80 or however many thousand a year, and all of a sudden you are spending money that can be matched. And one of the ways of doing that is to look at people that can help you actually apply and put the grants together. So some people work on a fee basis, some people work on a success basis. So again, a couple of different ways in terms of going in and having a look at that. Anything else that you can kind of remember from the session last week? The commitment and determination and that motivation to excel, I think, is to really go out there and do well. So those are some of the qualities that you need to have, and of course not everybody will have all of those qualities, but as a team you're going to be operating together. So teamwork is very much around sharing victory, but also around sharing defeat. So in terms of leading into the conversation to follow, which is very much around sharing victory, I'd like to introduce Julie Bedggood. And Julie is the co-founder and director of a very recent startup, a business that kicked off in 2006, but with a lot of work and build-up that went in behind that. So Julie's here to share her story this evening. So Julie, welcome.
Just in terms of context for tonight, and what I wanted to cover was to tell the story from concept through to where we are today, talking about the startup team that we've had on the journey, because it's changed as we've moved along, and I wanted to talk a bit about differences to other teams, and I guess for that it's because through my career I've done a lot of work with teams from kind of corporate team building in the mid-90s, where you were working with high-performing teams, through to project teams that are high-performing and what you need to do to make them work and what doesn't work. And I carried that through, when I did my Masters, carried that through into understanding about kind of people, process, technology, and the way that teams work together to make all of that happen. So it's an area that I'm particularly interested in. And often when things fail, it comes back to that teamwork dynamic and that people dynamic. And what I wanted to do tonight was, when I've gone and I've talked to people, what I've learnt the most is when people share the good times and the story, but it's when people share the times that aren't so good, and that's what you relate to as you work on your story, and you think, other people have been through this as well. So I thought I would share some of those things. So in Tallyman, what are we? We provide innovative solutions to the IT and IT solutions to the insurance industry. Our vision is to change the way that insurance is sold and administered. And anyone who's had anything to do with insurance companies, they're fairly bureaucratic. They're a long way behind the times. They're back to where banks used to be like 15 years ago, where where there's layers of bureaucracy, and everything's based on you have to work through people to make things happen. Things are just starting to move into a truly online space. So having worked within the insurance industry from a consulting perspective and developing and implementing major systems, we looked at how we could make that process